Hello, I'm Oskar Shirlev and you're watching news from Kazakhstan. The only surviving suspect in the anti-terrorist operation in Kulsare is wounded and in the hospital in Atyrau. The information was confirmed on Friday, September 14th, by the head doctor of the regional hospital. The decision to transfer him on the guard was made after Mr. A.S., as is named by a number of publications, came to his senses. According to doctors, the 20-year-old man is in stable condition. The native of the Makhanbet region was brought to the hospital with penetrating and fragment abdominal wounds, as well as damaged internal organs. He received an immediate surgery. So far, the family members have checked in looking for the wounded party. Security forces executed a special operation on September 12, 2012 in Kulsare, with 5 suspected terrorists reported dead and 1 in a hospital. He is currently in a special ward under security. No matter who the person is, we must provide the first aid. We first did it in the district and then we transferred him to the regional hospital. For us, he's just another patient. We don't care whether he's a terrorist or not. In the meantime, new details emerged regarding the special operation. Mothers of those who died in the shootout are convinced it is the police that opened fire on their sons. They refuse to believe in scary accusations. According to them, there was no explosion in the apartment. The police fired a tear gas canister, forcing young men out onto the balcony, where they were shot by snipers. Abarshi Berdigaliyeva was left without 2 sons, still cannot understand why they were killed. She says her sons never violated any laws, and while practicing Islam, they were not Wahhabis. Baksulu, the mother of the suspect Yelaman Atrarbayev, still doesn't know the fate of her son. On Thursday, he was declared injured, but on Friday, his family saw a plate with his name in the morgue. A few days ago, Baksulu's apartment was searched, with the police confiscating all found nails and metal wires. I'm the mother. Why can't I see the bodies of my children and bury them with honors? The police said that the body is disfigured and it is impossible to identify it. How can I just take their words for it? My children are not terrorists. I have raised 7 children and nobody have ever said a bad word about them. The day they've started reading Friday prayer, the authorities launched their persecution against us. I taught them only good things and how to make their living by fair means. Was it their fault that they wanted to live as righteous Muslims? Alexei Shkilov, the huntsman arrested in connection with the murder of 12 people in the Ilay-Alatau National Park, is exerted pressure on, reports his attorney. Moreover, none of the attorney's motions have been satisfied, says Yermurat Mukanov. Analysts shared their views on the investigation of this summer tragedy near Almaty. Gamekeeper Alexei Shkilov, suspected of being involved in the Ilay-Alatau Park mass murder case, has been subjected to tortures, says his attorney Yermurat Mukanov. The gamekeeper is in custody in a special detention facility, although he should have been transferred to the investigation detention center by now. The attorney insists the arrest should be cancelled since the prosecution has already announced that the incident is likely linked to the group involved in the Tan village shooting. The lawyer still cannot get the explanation of how Shkilov is related to the alleged terrorists or whether the police is trying to make his client a scapegoat. I'm not sure what they're trying to do, probably keeping Shkilov just in case they need a plan B. Perhaps it is related to some other criminal cases. But to be frank, Shkilov is detained unlawfully. Political scientist Marat Shebutov is closely following the investigation's all latest incidents. He says that there are grounds to believe in the link between Islamic terrorists and mass killing in the Ilay-Alatau Park, but there could be another explanation. Shebutov says children of senior officials could be involved in the massacre, as that would explain the suspicious silence of the authorities on the matter. The gamekeeper was arrested without any grounds for nothing, and then it transpired that the traces lead nowhere, or maybe the traces lead so far up that policemen themselves are afraid of even going there. Immediately after the Ilay-Alatau tragedy, the police discovered some suspicious shelters in the forest and then encountered the armed resistance in the Tan settlement. In the course of the special operation, the suspects were killed, and now people are wondering if the gamekeeper and his friends became the victims of these suspects or fell prey to other criminals. But except for the information about Shkilov arrested for possession of unregistered firearms, no other data is available to the public. Ilay-Alatau Park is a good place for hiding, and at one point or the other, people from certain extremist organizations could stay there. The public should know this, and I'm not saying that we should spread the panic, but people have to be prepared and be aware that such risks are real and the problem does exist. Satpayev believes that whatever the outcome of the investigation of Ile Alatau and Arkan Kergen mass killings will be, the incidents already created enormous public response. The analyst warned about the new threats back in 2003 when he published a book, Survival in the Conditions of the Urban Terrorism. Many chances have been lost by this point, but something can be done even now. For instance, Satpayev proposed to place terrorism suspects in special penitentiary facilities, as otherwise the religious fundamentalists can replace criminal bosses in prisons and turn jails into ideological centers. Defense questioning concluded in the case of inciting social hatred. The last to give testimonies on Friday was Serik Sapargali, the opposition politician of a national patriotic kind, which Sapargali requested to be called, spoke about what brought him to Zhanaozen. The oilman engineer by education began his career in Zhanaozen, which is why he could not leave his colleagues' issues unattended. He wanted to help. At the end of his speech, Sapargali expressed a wish to make a personal confession. Serik Sapargali described the charges against him as a death sentence. The public activist commented with bitter sadness that if he'll receive even a half of the intended sentence, he won't stay alive for long due to poor health. Sapargali notes, quote, "I'm sincerely sorry and I admit my guilt, as my words and actions could have had a negative impact and led to the December events in Zhanaozen." The confession was quickly spread through the news agencies, although state-owned media still distorted the message. In particular, Kazinform interpreted the words of Sapargali as if they indicated his involvement in Vladimir Kozlov's criminal group. It's a lie because he didn't say anything like that. In fact, he said something to the effect of, "I'm sorry if my words or actions were misinterpreted and influenced the December 16 events." That's what he approximately said. Thus, I believe that the agency is deliberately misleading its audience, which is unacceptable. As his attorney, I officially state that he didn't say such things during the trial. Even in the testimonies, there is not a word about his membership in Vladimir Kozlov's organized criminal group or a criminal link between them. They have different political stance. That's what he actually said in the courtroom. Therefore, I confirm that these words were spoken during the trial, and I believe that mass media spread a very slanderous statement on Friday. After Serik Sapargali's questioning, Judge Mirzabekov announced the start of examining material evidence which were included in the case. The most amount of time was spent on Skype conferences, which was one of the main arguments for the creation of an organized criminal group between Mukhtar Ablyazov and Vladimir Kozlov. It took place on April 30th, 2010. On Friday, the public was persuaded, did Mukhtar Ablyazov really prepare a violent overthrow of the government, which the prosecution is trying to prove. Instead of discussions about overthrowing Nazarbayev's rule, the audience had to listen to attempts to set up the call and constant disconnections for over an hour. Only at the end of the so-called conference, a short dialogue was heard filled with friendly jokes, exchanges of impressions, and Mukhtar Ablyazov's comments on the situation in Kyrgyzstan and Georgia. The well-known banker talked about achievements of new governments in the two states, as well as about their mistakes that should be avoided in Kazakhstan. During the Skype call, Ablyazov expressed his position and views on events in Georgia, Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan. In addition, he also shared his thoughts on how the opposition should operate in Kazakhstan. He heavily criticized the involvement of security forces in settling the issues, for example, in Georgia, where they were called to disperse the protesters. Ablyazov believes that such developments shouldn't be allowed during the peaceful transition of power after legitimate elections. If that's the case, then violent resolution of issues should be avoided. A suspended sentence turned real. Former Zhanaozen mayor Zhalgaz Babakhanov was convicted for 2 years in prison. The Mangistau Regional Appeals Court made the decision after the general prosecutor's interference. According to the investigators, Zhalgaz Babakhanov misappropriated the funds of the Zhanashir fund while in the position of the mayor. He distributed the money among businessmen, bought real estate and cars for the city administration staff, and ordered expensive renovation for apartments. According to the prosecutor's office, Zhanaozen mayors Babakhanov and Arak Sarbapeyev embezzled the funds of Zhanashir and Zharylkau foundations. Both officials were arrested following the tragedy in Zhanaozen. Sarbapeyev was later acquitted on June 22, 2012, while Babakhanov received 2 years conditional term on July 20th. In response, Zhanaozen residents, unhappy with the verdict, staged several protests. We, the residents of the city, believe that Babakhanov should get either a life in prison or death penalty. He embezzled billions and everything in town belonged to him. When he came here and worked in construction, he had nothing but a shirt, and he did nothing when others worked for him. Then he became the director of the state company and put the city communal services out of business to create his own company. From 1996 to 2000, people wouldn't even receive subsidies for funerals, let alone salaries, and we had to beg and fight for them. Oil workers of Karajan Basmunai company appealed to the president of the country. They made a video appeal. Sacked during the strike last year, the workers are asking the head of state to pay attention to their problems. Attorney Alexander Pistolov read out the appeal on behalf of oil workers. After the tragic events in Zhanaozen, Nursultan Nazarbayev ordered to resolve labor conflicts in the region within 2 weeks. This order was given by the leader of the nation to the governor of the region, president of KMG Lezat Keinov, and the head of companies of KMG, Alik Aydarbayev. At the time, officials promised to improve the situation and resolve all issues concerning the rights of oil workers. However, nothing has changed since then. Alexander Pistolov says that some reporters are distorting the core problem at the heart of the labor dispute by spreading false information. Supposedly, oil workers never demanded to increase wages, as this issue was never raised in Uzen, Rajanbas or any other oil companies. The problem was with the industry's rates varying from 1.7 in Mangistau to 1.6 in Atarau. The human rights activist believes that this distortion of information last year delayed the settlement of the labor dispute and led to bloodshed in Zhanaozen on December 16th. It appears that before the start of the dispute, all workers in Zhanaozen and Karajanbas received salaries with regularly adjusted industry rate bonuses, with final payments of up to $2,400, the amount actually indicated in statistics reports for Astana. In reality, though, oil workers were getting paid only a half of that, says Pistolov, which means someone embezzled the rest of the funds. With all this information on hand, the human rights activists appealed to the president and requested him to immediately step in to look into the issue, which raises tension in the region.
До настоящего времени ни одна ветвь власти, ни правительство,
So far, none of the branches of the government, including the Attorney General's office, governors, special commission led by Shukeyev, or newly appointed managers are fulfilling legitimate demands of oil workers and orders of the head of state. We're openly appealing to the president to ensure that his orders and instructions on timely resolution of labor conflicts are fulfilled by all branches of the government. Kazmunaygas exploration and production made a response to the criticism of international human rights defending organization Human Rights Watch. On Thursday, HRW published a report in which they blamed the government of Kazakhstan and 3 oil companies, including EPKMG, Yersay Caspian Contractor, and Ozenmunaygas, in ignoring the demands of oil workers during the strike and violation of their rights. Human Rights Watch also blamed the employer for the bloodshed in December of last year. The company calls the report as one-sided. Human Rights Watch representatives have not consulted with the leadership of Kazmunaygas during the preparation of the report. In February 2012, the organization appealed to Kazmunaygas with an official inquiry and received comprehensive answers to all their questions in writing. This letter is attached to the report. However, the information provided by the company was not reflected in the report. Due to this, Kazmunaygas believes that the Human Rights Watch report was prepared without the consideration of employers' opinion and is somewhat one-sided. The expected dialogue between the authorities and opposition is not yet happening. The hearings over the petition of the leaders of NSDP Azad to the Almaty city administration were held this week. Social Democrats are demanding the Almaty authorities to let them hold assemblies in the center of the city. The hearings will resume on Monday. More details in the next report. The National Social Democratic Party Azad continues to defend its rights for peaceful assembly in places where the citizens of the country want and not where the city administration tells them. Social Democrats are trying to bring City Mayor Yesimov, his deputy Seydumanov and secretary of the local legislation body Mukashov to justice. In recent years, activists have received a bulk of rejections to their assembly applications, with the most recent for the rally dedicated to the memory of repressed prisoners, planned to be held next to the monument of Chokan Valikhanov. In addition, the rejection letter refers to the local administration decree dated 2005, which says that all social and political gatherings of non-public organizations are to be held in the park behind the movie theater Sararka. We believe that the actions of the Almaty mayor, his deputy and officials of the local legislative body are not legitimate. The complainants have to bring their arguments not directly to officials and administration staff, but to their two representatives who have been employed only recently and quite obviously do not have a clear picture of many issues discussed. The specified area for peaceful gatherings is in the vicinity of the roadway with heavy traffic, while the territory near the monument to Chokan Valikhanov at the junction of Shevchenko and Valikhanov streets can accommodate up to 200 people. Social Democrat Amirjan Kasanov noted that major assemblies have already taken place in the indicated area, as commemorations of prominent Kazakh officials are also frequently held near Valikhanov's monument. In 2006, about 5,000 people gathered there to pay tribute to Altanbek Sarsimbayev. The funeral turned into a rally, as citizens resented the assassination of the opposition politician. Obviously, more than 200 people came to the funeral. But funeral is not a protest action. Similar reaction and laughter often occurred during the hearings. Party members prepared a lot of arguments, and it is clear that young officials did not have enough experience to explain what made their chiefs repeatedly deny the opposition the right to hold peaceful assemblies downtown. Kasanov cited the opposite state of things concerning mass actions held by the ruling party during the election campaign January this year. I remember that Nuratan party held its political gatherings at the stadium just before the elections. Do you think that the city administration could allow other political parties which have the same equal rights to hold such political gatherings in the same location too? We believe that the analogy with other events in 2005 and 2006 is not justified. They do not refer to the recent rejections of the city administration as well as the local legislative body. Why don't they? Nuratan party has the same rights as our party. Young man, what are you doing right now is inciting a cross-party strife. The city administration marked the square behind the movie theater Sararka as a place to hold rallies. This area has long been nicknamed the settlement. It's remote and out of sight of the intended objects of criticism, for example, officials. Representatives of defendants seemingly cannot understand why social activists mined the area behind Sararka, and plaintiffs had to lecture them on the matter. As I see, you're an expert in geography and history. Could you tell me, please, where the White House is located? In Washington, D.C. Is it on the outskirts or in the city center? On the outskirts. Are you sure about that? No, I'm not sure. You are not sure, really? All right, the White House is in the center of Washington, and I do not understand why Sararka cannot be considered a city center. Well, then you're welcome to rally there with the president and other officials right behind the Sararka. Now, Hyde Park. Where is it located? In London. I already told you I can judge the case just through the information in mass media. Your examples are flawed and unusable here. Why? You should think before you speak. Hyde Park is in the heart of London. Yes, but I ask you again, why Sararka cannot be considered the center of the city? It is not a far-out neighborhood, is it? The city administration often refers their rejection to the decision that appears to be just guidelines, since it was never registered in the judiciary. Lawyer Sergei Utkin noted another interesting moment. If a case concerns a local legislative body, only a secretary is entitled to appear before the court on its behalf. But in this trial, it is represented by the expert of the legal staff. Do you know that in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act, the decision is made in the form of a legal act? Is this letter a legal act? What can we make of your silence? I will not answer. Well, that's strange. After their speech, the leaders of the National Social Democratic Party submitted a motion to involve witnesses in the case. The chief editor of Jasalash newspaper, Rızbek Sarsinbayev, and social activist Georgy Arkhangelsky said that the city administration need to change their attitudes towards public gatherings and brought various examples of civil rights violations during rallies. Later in the day, the judge announced debates, signaling the near end of the process. The doors of the Almaty City Court are now open for journalists. On Friday, the chief judge presented to the journalists the press center, where, according to his statement, once in 2 weeks, court representatives will talk about the conducted work and answer to the emerging questions. Moreover, Meiranbek Taymerdenov noted that open doors will be held every last Friday of the month.
Для освещения нашей повседневной работы
we want to establish close contact with mass media to cover our daily work and get an insight into cases reviewed by district courts as well as Almaty City Court. It's been 6 months since Taymerdenov took office in his new position. Prior to that, he was the chairman of the Almaty Regional Court. The official told reporters he follows principles of transparency and openness, although evaded questions on court corruption, biased approach to political cases and limited media access during the trials. At the same time, Taymerdenov emphasizes he will stay unbiased and objective, but reporters seemed unconvinced, some saying that only time will show if things will change for the better. The wholesale prices for gasoline might go up, say members of the Kazakh Fuel Association. They shared their fears in Astana during a roundtable. They say that either gasoline prices will go up for drivers or gas stations will be closed. More details next. The owners of gas stations reiterate that their businesses are at risk. The official Astana explains that the situation was caused by the gasoline price hike sought after by wholesale companies. Pavlodar oil refinery has been planning to raise prices by 8% in September. The authorities have managed to persuade oil producers not to do so. However, retailers believe that the wholesalers would not think twice when the oil prices goes up, as it has been lately. Moreover, since the government doesn't set the price cap for refiners, they are not going to operate at a loss. This despite gas station tycoons requesting the Ministry of Oil and Gas to increase their margins. These days they sell it for less than 17%. We've addressed them a number of times, saying that it is indeed causing losses. We requested for the rate of 25 to 30%, same as in Russia. It's the difference between wholesale and retail. As noted by Bolat Auyatayev, the situation becomes even more complicated since Russian companies have already raised gasoline prices by 30%. Thus, Kazakh retailers are no longer capable of compensating the lack of fuel, which has already affected the market. An expert from the pro-government Center for Development and Protection of Competition Policies, Zhandos Bolatbekov, understands the problem of gas station owners. He admits that the government regulation approach needs some adjustment, while defining price limits should be set for wholesalers. They have room for actions after all. They manage to recover or purchase oil products someplace, have them refined and reduce or set their price, enabling the retailers to openly compete in the price range. Zhandos Bolatbekov also noted that retailers don't give an option to consumers. They all have the same high prices. Therefore, he believes that raising the rates for the cost of fuel for gas stations is unpromising. In this situation, the cost of gasoline will rise immediately, while it's not going to affect the competition. In the meantime, the anti-monopoly agency believes that everyone on the fuel market is in collusion, including wholesalers. However, the agency is not doing anything about it. We can't investigate and follow them around with voice recorders at our own initiative, like they do in the United States. Instead, you need to address the petition to our agency and then we'll deal with this issue. But that's only if you have solid evidence against two companies which conspire to set the same price. Drivers obviously didn't like the news of a possible price hike. They are not concerned with who is to blame for the situation, convinced that only the government is able to restrain both large and small market participants. Of course, the price hike for gasoline is not a good thing. Instead of raising prices, the government should give some kind of subsidies to gas stations and oil producers and let them sort out and regulate the price themselves. Some wholesaler decided to raise prices, although has no rights to do so. Only the government and the anti-monopoly committee regulate it. Since the government controls the prices, it might as well do so in the industries, both for wholesalers and end users. It is worth noting that on Friday, the head of the anti-monopoly agency, Murat Aspanov, reported that Air Astana ticket prices may be reduced in the near future. Since the cost of the barrel of oil is dropping, the jet fuel price will be coming down as well. Young residents of Pavlodar appealed to Nursultan Nazarbayev and Vladimir Putin with a request to assist in beautification of their yard. Children don't even recall when there was a proper sports ground. For many years they have to play soccer on an old shabby field. The remaining equipment, what's left of it, could fail at any moment, and smaller kids don't even have anything to play with. Parents appealed to the authorities many times, asking for help in improving services and amenities. However, nothing has changed in Pavlodar so far. Desperate teenagers wrote a letter to presidents of Kazakhstan and Russia, who will visit the town next week during the International Cooperation Forum. Kids are hopeful that the two heads of states can make their dreams come true. We wrote this letter to make this a reality one day. For a long time, we've been waiting for a chance to play sports in good environments, but the local authorities didn't react to our appeals, so we decided to address Nursultan Nazarbayev and Vladimir Putin. We don't want to smoke, use drugs or consume alcohol. All we want is the opportunity to play in our yards and lead healthy lifestyle. Disabled Israel Aznabkeyev threatens to organize a protest action. He yet again arrived in Astana from Atyrau, demanding help with the construction of his house. To recap, in February he was able to arrange a meeting with the head of President's administration, Aslan Musin. Mr. Musin ordered the governor of Mangistau region, Baurjan Muhamedjanov, to include the disabled man into the list of those entitled to receive housing. After the phone call from the president's administration, Israel Aznabkeyev received 4 cards of wall stones, 6 plastic window frames and 6 doors. The funds for the construction were allocated in small amounts, and the disabled man had to fight for each transfer. Even then, Israel didn't manage to complete the construction and came to the capital on Thursday to secure the rest of the promised funds. Now the disabled man plans to stay in the railway station along with his children and wife until the president hears his appeal made through mass media. This time I came personally to claim my rights and receive the promised allowances for renovation of my house. Can this be finally done, at least for the sake of these small children? Public activists and experts took part in a charity event to help children in need of urgent medical treatment. In one of the trade centers of Almaty, the director of risk assessment group, Dasim Satbayev, took part in a circus show dedicated to the 8-year-old Dias Kakpayev, who is in need of treatment of cerebral palsy. The care for the lives and problems of not only close ones but also people you don't know is very heroic. The charity is so much more than just rendering financial aid. It is a lifestyle. I wish more people would adhere to that in Kazakhstan. Diaz was born with the illness, but his seizures are curable. The child's mother says that they have found a clinic in Ukraine and doctors are ready to help. They need the total of around 6,000 euros for travel and treatment. In order to draw attention and raise funds for the surgery, the organizers, represented by one of the Almaty TV channels and political expert Dasim Satbayev, came up with a circus show. The Ukrainian International Children's Clinic in Truskovets, which specializes on infantile cerebral paralysis and central nervous system damage disorders, offered to help us. They say it is possible to stop seizures and make him more self-supporting. This is all we have time for now. Don't forget to watch Last KZ on Monday. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.